Okay, so picture this. You're miles from civilization, maybe on a hike or something, and bam, you trip, twist an ankle, maybe even get a cut.
Oh, I can feel the pain already.
Right. Or how about this? You're on a road trip, middle of nowhere, and suddenly you're hit with a fever.
Yeah, talk about bad timing.
And that's where this medical guide we're diving into today comes in handy. It's for those situations when you can't just, pop over to the doctor.
Makes sense.
Of course, it's not a replacement for actual medical care, but it's got all these self-care tips that could be, well, lifesavers in a pinch.
Yeah, it's all about giving you the knowledge to, stay safe and make good decisions when it really matters. And the guide starts with something really important, which is recognizing when you absolutely need to seek emergency help. Like, no messing around.
It really gets straight to the point, huh? It gives you these, clear red flags.
Yeah, like difficulty breathing.
Right, that's a big one.
Severe chest pain or abdominal pain.
Yeah, those are all instant calls for help, right?
Absolutely, no question. It's almost like having a mental checklist, right? Head injuries where someone loses consciousness, major burns, any signs of a stroke, a bad allergic reaction, bleeding. You can't stop any of those. Getting to emergency services is the priority, right?
Definitely. But then there are those times that might not be full-blown emergencies, but you still need to do something.
Right. Like, what about fevers? The guide goes into some detail about that.
Okay, it gets pretty specific.
Yeah, it actually gives you a temperature number.
Oh, interesting.
For adults, 103 degrees Fahrenheit or 39.4 Celsius is when they say a fever is usually cause for concern.
So that's good to keep in mind, that number. And then it goes into ways to manage fever. And I was surprised by how many methods there are that don't involve medication.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like cool compresses, lukewarm baths. Actually, I used a cool compress once when I was traveling and got a fever, and it really did help.
It's amazing how effective those simple things can be. And the guide emphasizes rest, too. Give your body a chance to fight whatever's going on. Over-the-counter fever reducers are an option, but only if you have them available.
Yeah.
The focus is really on those, first steps you can take on your own.
Being resourceful, right.
Exactly.
Okay, now, let's face it, most of us are prone to the occasional bump or scrape.
Oh, for sure.
I swear, I'm a magnet for minor cuts. So what about wound care? What does the guide say about that?
Well, it gives this really clear step-by-step approach. And the very first thing is always clean hands. Always.
So important.
Then you got to rinse the wound with clean water, clean the area around it with mild soap and water, and apply pressure to stop any bleeding. Direct pressure.
Got it. So basic hygiene and stopping the bleeding are the top priorities. What about after that? What comes next?
Well, if you have it, antiseptic is next, and then a sterile bandage to protect the wound. And they remind you to change the bandage regularly, especially if it gets wet or dirty.
Makes sense. Not just covering it up, but trying to prevent infection. Speaking of infection, the guide is really good about pointing out signs that, maybe things are getting worse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So more than just a little redness or swelling.
Right. Like if the redness is getting worse or the area feels warm to the touch, red streaks, a lot of swelling, fever, pus, or a bad smell coming from the wound, any of those, you really should see a doctor right away.
Okay, noted. So we've talked fevers, wounds, infections. What about stomach troubles?
Yes, digestive issues. The guide talks about something called the brat diet for that kind of thing.
Brat diet? I've heard of that, but I always thought it was just some random acronym.
Well, it stands for bananas, rice, applesauce, and toast. And they recommend it because those foods are all really easy to digest and gentle on your stomach, especially if it's upset.
So there's a reason behind it.
Definitely. Like, for instance, bananas have a lot of potassium, which you can lose if you've been throwing up or have diarrhea.
So it's like giving your stomach a break and replenishing what it needs.
Exactly. The guide also says to avoid things like dairy products, anything fatty, and sugary drinks because those can actually make things worse. And resting your stomach for a while can help too, like not eating anything if you've been vomiting. Oh, and oral rehydration solutions, if you have them, those are really good for getting back fluids and electrolytes. Those are minerals that are super important for your body to function properly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got fevers, wounds, infections, even a cranky stomach covered. Now, what about when it's your breathing that's giving you trouble?
So for those kind of mild respiratory issues, the guide has some pretty simple advice, but it's surprisingly effective.
Oh, like what?
Like staying upright to help you breathe easier.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense when you think about how your lungs expand.
Exactly. Steam inhalation can help too, to loosen up mucus and congestion. And of course, staying hydrated is always important, no matter what.
Right. Yeah, this one I found interesting, using honey for a cough. I mean, come on, really.
I know, right? But honey actually has these soothing properties, and it can really help calm a cough, especially in kids.
Huh. Learn something new every day. Okay, so we've covered how to deal with all sorts of stuff. But what about preventing these things in the first place? Isn't that a big part of this whole self-care idea?
You're absolutely right. And that's where this guide switches from reacting to being proactive. It's like preparing for a fire, you know? You wouldn't wait till the flames are at your door to start thinking about how to get out.
So it's about having a plan, being ready for the unexpected.
Exactly. And a big part of that is having a well-stocked first aid kit.
Now, mine is basically just a bunch of old Band-Aids and, like, questionable antiseptic wipes. What should we actually be keeping in there?
Well, the guide has a good list, and it goes beyond just bandages. Different sizes of bandages, sterile gauze pads, medical tape, scissors, tweezers, all the basics.
Right, that makes sense. What about some of the less obvious stuff?
Well, antiseptic wipes, of course, but they also really stress having pain relievers and oral rehydration salts. Those electrolytes, like we talked about, are crucial.
Right. It's not just about being hydrated. It's about having the right balance of stuff in your body.
Yeah.
Thermometer, too, right?
Definitely, to check for fevers. And don't forget important phone numbers like emergency contacts and any medical information you might need.
You know, speaking of first aid kits, it reminds me of this time I was hiking with some friends, and one of them took a really nasty fall. Luckily, I had a decent kit with me, and we were able to clean and bandage the wound until we could get help.
It's those moments you're so glad to have it, right? It gives you the sense of control when something happens.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot, from recognizing emergencies to taking care of ourselves and the importance of being prepared. Where do we go from here? What are some of the main takeaways you think our listeners should remember?
Well, I think the biggest one is that knowledge really is power. Just understanding some basic first aid and having the right supplies can make a world of difference.
And being proactive, right? Having that first aid kit and thinking ahead.
Absolutely. It gives you peace of mind, knowing you're ready for anything. It's cool how this guide really focuses on that idea of self-reliance, but not in like a scary way. You know, it's more about feeling like you can handle things, like you've got the tools.
Right, exactly. Like, it's not about becoming some, like, wilderness expert overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It's about having the knowledge to feel confident when something unexpected happens. Speaking of knowledge, this guide goes beyond just first aid. It actually talks about, like, looking into more in-depth medical guides or even taking a first aid course.
Yeah, that's a good point, because this guide is great, don't get me wrong, but it's really just the beginning, right? It gets you interested, teaches you the basics, and then kind of encourages you to, like, keep learning.
Totally. It's like that first step that leads you down a rabbit hole, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe you take a wilderness first aid course, or you volunteer with a disaster relief group, or maybe you just start researching, like, local plants that have medicinal properties. There's so much you can do.
I know, right? That's what's so cool about preparedness. It's not just about bandages and pills. It's about, like, figuring things out and connecting with your community, too.
It's about being resilient, both for yourself and the people around you.
And like we said before, it's not just about the physical stuff. It's also about being mentally tough. You know, having that inner strength so you can stay calm and think clearly when things get rough.
It's like having a mental and emotional first aid kit as well as the physical one.
Exactly. When you feel truly prepared, you're not afraid. You're ready for anything.
It's like saying, bring it on.
Yeah.
Because you know you've got what it takes, the tools and skills and people to support you, no matter what happens.
That's a great way to put it. And that's really the message I hope people take away from this. Preparedness isn't about being scared. It's about feeling empowered.
It's about taking charge of your own well-being and feeling confident enough to try new things.
Exactly. And you know, that confidence can actually spread to other people. When you feel prepared, it can inspire those around you to do the same.
That's so true. And speaking of inspiring others, the guide makes this point about how preparing shouldn't be something you do alone. Like, it encourages you to talk to your family and friends about emergency plans and things like, you know, medical wishes, even though those conversations can be hard sometimes.
I know those conversations can be tough, but they're so important, right? It's not just about taking care of yourself. It's about making sure everyone around you is safe and prepared too.
It's about having each other's backs, knowing that you've got people you can count on if things go wrong.
And honestly, even though those conversations might be difficult at first, they can actually bring you closer to the people you care about. And they can give you all some peace of mind knowing that you're on the same page.
Yeah, it's all about being open and honest so that everyone feels informed and prepared.
And sometimes those conversations can even lead to some pretty cool discoveries, you know? Like you might find out your grandpa was like a wilderness survival expert back in the day.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Or maybe your quiet aunt is secretly a first aid ninja.
Right. You never know what kind of hidden talents and knowledge are out there in your family.
It's like finding this whole secret network of support and expertise.
And that can be so valuable, not just in emergencies, but in everyday life, too.
So I guess what we're learning here is that being prepared is about way more than just having the right stuff. It's about mental strength, resilience, and having people you can rely on.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. It's about moving from a place of fear and uncertainty to a place of, like, confidence and knowing you can handle anything.
This whole deep dive has really made me think about that idea of, like, taking control and feeling empowered.
Me too. It's not about hiding from the world, you know? It's about being ready for whatever life throws at you.
And it doesn't have to be scary, right? It can actually be exciting, like an adventure.
Definitely. It's about enjoying life and knowing you've got the tools and the people to support you every step of the way.
So, speaking of what's next, we'll be back soon with the last part of this deep dive, where we'll talk about even more resources and tips to help you keep learning and growing.
Wow, we've really covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, haven't we? From the, like, very practical stuff, like how to take care of a wound.
Yeah.
To that surprising tip about honey.
Oh, yeah.
And also the importance of talking to our loved ones, you know, about being prepared for emergencies.
Right.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has been. And as we're wrapping up here, you know, it makes me think about how being prepared is really a journey.
Yeah.
And not so much like a destination, you know?
Yeah, I get what you mean. Like, it's not about just checking things off a list and being like, okay, I'm done, I'm prepared.
Exactly. It's more about always learning new things, figuring out what works best for you.
And adapting. Right.
Right.
This medical guide that we've been talking about, it's a great place to start.
Yeah.
But it really is just the beginning, you know? It gets you thinking about this stuff, gives you some basic tools. Right.
And then kind of encourages you to go and do more, learn more.
Totally. It's like that first step that takes you down, like a whole new path. Maybe you decide to take a wilderness first aid course.
Yeah.
Or you could volunteer with some kind of disaster relief organization. Or maybe you just start, like, learning about medicinal plants in your area. I mean, there's really so much you can explore.
There really is, yeah. And that's what I find so exciting about being prepared. It's not just about, you know, bandages and medicine. It's about being resourceful, and it's about being part of your community.
Yeah, exactly. It's about that resilience, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you, too.
And like we talked about before, it's not just about the physical stuff either. It's about having that inner strength, you know, that calmness and clear thinking that helps you deal with whatever comes your way.
It's like having that mental and emotional first aid kit we talked about, ready to go.
Right. Because when you really feel prepared, it's not about being afraid of things. It's about, like, being excited to live your life, you know? It's about being ready for anything, like saying, bring it on. Because you know you have the skills and the tools and the people you need to handle whatever happens.
That's exactly it. And that's what I hope people listening really understand. Being prepared isn't about being paranoid.
Right.
It's about having the power to take care of yourself and the people you care about.
Absolutely. It's about being in control of your own well-being and going through life with a sense of, like, curiosity and courage.
Yeah. So go out there, be prepared, be curious, and most importantly, be kind to yourselves and to each other.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
And that you feel inspired to, keep learning and keep preparing for whatever life throws your way.
Absolutely. Until next time, everyone stay curious, stay informed, and stay prepared.
Dia.